Hi, this is 911. Your phone dialed. Is everything okay?
No, ma'am, I'm sitting with a guy. He said he shot somebody, but I'm waiting on the bus. Y'all got to come and see him.
What did he say happened?
He said he shot somebody.
Okay.
He's right here on Peru and Delaware. He said he shot his girl or something. I don't know. But ma'am, I'm waiting on the bus. He's sitting right here.
Okay. Could you give me a description of him or what's his name?
He said he shot somebody on 10th and Holmes. She said, "What's your name, man?"
Don't matter.
It don't matter. He said it don't matter. So I'm waiting on the bus. So he's
Okay.
sitting
What
right
is
here
he
on
wearing? Like what
He's
color
wearing
shirt?
all black
Okay.
and a black hat.
He's a black male?
Yeah. I told him I'm waiting on the bus, so I can't sit here and wait.
Okay.
He said he shot somebody on 10th and Holmes.
Okay. Can you ask him when did this happen?
He said today, ma'am. I'm waiting on the bus, ma'am.
That's all right.
Okay, I'm just making a call for him. All right.
Have been posting their questions and comments on our Facebook page. It's a story that has touched so many people's hearts and again has some of you asking questions that you'd like to know. Some of the things like, how could this happen? How could Krystal Walton do everything she could to protect herself and her family? How could she end up dead? What went wrong? Now, we do know that Orlando Mitchell had 2 warrants from previous domestic violence incidents where Walton was the victim. Mitchell also had a no contact order. So, for example, Kathleen Anderson wrote on our Facebook page, quote, "It's widely said that a piece of paper, a protective order, will not stop someone who is willing to go to these lengths. Law enforcement, courts, social services, they all need to learn from these numerous cases." We also heard from Tizzy Kate. She wrote, quote, "What can we do to make sure these domestic violence victims are protected yet are able to live freely? How was he not arrested and put on a bond for the first case against her?" Now, Tizzy also wanted to know why a plea deal was given. Kathy Bannister, she also asked, why was the initial charge of strangulation dropped? Charges are dropped and then he only serves 1 day. Why would a judge agree with that? So we, again, have reached out to Prosecutor Mears' office for these and other questions that you have out there. And again, we hope to hear from him in the next 24 hours. We also reached out to domestic violence advocates to shed light on an issue that affects thousands of families each year.
Story is on Krystal Walton, a 32-year-old mother from Indianapolis who is raising 2 children while trying to build a stable life for herself and her family. She worked in healthcare, had recently become a homeowner, and to the people around her, she was known as someone who stayed focused on her children no matter what was happening around her. But behind that life was a relationship that had already become filled with fear. The man she shared her youngest child with, Orlando Mitchell, already had a history of violence toward her before September 2022 ever arrived. Protective orders were already in place. Family members were already worried something terrible was eventually going to happen. And on the morning of September 16, 2022, Krystal was simply taking her children to daycare. What she didn't know was that Orlando was already there before she arrived. After walking her children safely inside charity childcare, Krystal turned and headed back toward her car. But outside that daycare, with parents, staff, and children nearby, Orlando suddenly approached her and opened fire. The entire morning changed within seconds. By then, Krystal Walton was gone. And as investigators started uncovering the history leading up to that morning, one question quickly followed behind it. How many warning signs existed before Krystal Walton was finally killed? Welcome to Family Crimes TV. I bring you gripping true crime stories every day centered around family, relationships, and the moments where everything changes. If you're drawn to real cases, dark realities, and the psychology behind crimes within families, subscribe now and like this video as you step deeper into the story with me. Krystal Walton was born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. A city with neighborhoods where people often know each other for years, where routines become familiar, and where family connections run deep across generations. On the west side of the city, people who knew Krystal remembered someone who carried herself with warmth and responsibility. She was intelligent, dependable, and deeply focused on the people she loved most. Krystal was simply living her life as a mother, trying to create stability for her children. She worked in healthcare as a radiology technologist, a career that required patience, consistency, and trust. Co-workers later described her as joyful and dependable, someone who showed up for people and carried herself with confidence. She was raising her daughter while balancing work, responsibilities, and the normal pressures of adulthood. But the people around her still saw someone determined to keep moving forward. And by 2021, it looked like parts of her life were finally falling into place. On social media, Krystal shared that she had officially become a homeowner. It was a major milestone, one that represented independence, security, and a future she was building for herself and her children. What made the moment even more emotional was the timing. Just hours after closing on the house, she gave birth to her son. To family and friends, it felt like the beginning of an entirely new chapter. A new home, a growing family, a fresh start. But while Krystal was trying to create peace and stability around her children, another part of her life was becoming increasingly unstable behind closed doors. Around 2017, Krystal had entered a relationship with Orlando Mitchell. At first, the relationship appeared normal from the outside. Publicly, they looked like a couple building a future together. They eventually had a child together, and when Krystal announced her pregnancy in February 2021, the announcement appeared happy and hopeful. But beneath that public image, tension had already started growing. Over time, Orlando reportedly became increasingly controlling and jealous. Arguments became more intense. The relationship slowly shifted away from normal disagreements and towards something heavier. Krystal increasingly found herself trying to keep the peace, rather than simply living comfortably inside the relationship. By the time she was pregnant with their son, people close to the situation were already beginning to notice signs that something was wrong. Then in March of 2021, the violence escalated into something far more serious. On March 20th, while Krystal was 4 months pregnant, an incident unfolded inside the home that would later become one of the clearest warning signs in the entire case. That day, the father of Krystal's daughter arrived to pick up their child. What should have been a normal exchange quickly turned tense after Orlando became jealous over the interaction. The situation escalated inside the home as the argument intensified. At some point during that confrontation, Orlando became physical. He grabbed Krystal. He pulled her by the hair. Prosecutors later said he choked her while she was pregnant with his child. During the assault, he reportedly made statements saying he did not want the baby. What made the situation even more horrifying was that Krystal's daughter witnessed everything happening in front of her. The child reportedly screamed and intervened while watching her mother being attacked. Eventually, Orlando released his grip. Krystal grabbed her daughter and got out of the house. She drove directly to her mother's home and called police from there. That moment changed the direction of everything. Up until then, the relationship may still have been something Krystal hoped could somehow stabilize. But after that incident, fear became real. The violence was no longer emotional tension or escalating arguments. It had crossed into physical danger while she was pregnant. Police investigated the assault, and Orlando was charged with 4 felonies: strangulation, domestic battery, criminal confinement, and intimidation. For Krystal, the arrest likely felt like the beginning of protection. A sign that what happened inside that house had finally crossed a line serious enough to force real consequences. But the outcome that followed became one of the most painful parts of the story. Despite the seriousness of the allegations, the case moved slowly through the court system, and eventually, Orlando Mitchell pleaded guilty to only a single misdemeanor domestic battery charge. The remaining felony charges were dismissed as part of the agreement. Instead of serving significant prison time, he received a suspended sentence, probation, a batterer's intervention program, and a no-contact order involving Krystal and her daughter, except for arrangements involving their son. Legally, he was prohibited from possessing firearms. But despite the protective orders and court conditions, Orlando was still free. And that reality slowly became impossible to ignore. To the public, social media sometimes painted a completely different picture. Orlando posted photos with his son and publicly portrayed himself as a father being pushed away. On Mother's Day, he posted a message celebrating mothers. Krystal commented underneath the post, saying it looked like it needed to be edited. Orlando responded directly back to her publicly. Not long afterward, he posted more photos of their son with captions about how Daddy loves you, while also implying that Krystal was keeping the child away from him. The online posts created a growing narrative where Orlando publicly framed himself as someone being denied access to his son. But at the same time, the legal reality surrounding him told a much different story. Protective orders were already in place, violence allegations already existed, court restrictions already existed. And while Orlando publicly complained about access to his son, Krystal was increasingly trying to create distance and safety. On August 6, 2022, the situation escalated again. Despite the active protective order against him, Orlando showed up at Krystal's home demanding to see their son earlier than scheduled. Krystal refused, but Orlando forced his way inside the house anyway. When Krystal threatened to call police, Orlando reportedly told her, "This will be the last time you call for someone." The threat immediately changed the atmosphere inside the home. Instead of escalating the situation further, Krystal reportedly called Orlando's mother while he was still inside the house, hoping the situation would calm down. Eventually, Orlando left after several minutes, but once he was gone, Krystal reported the incident to law enforcement. The following day, she received a text message from Orlando that made the situation even more disturbing. In the message, he reportedly warned her that if she kept playing with him, he would not stop until she lost everything: her house, her job, and her child. By that point, the obsession with control had become increasingly obvious. Soon afterward, probation violation notices were filed against Orlando connected to the protective order violations. Arrest warrants were issued. Additional charges including invasion of privacy, intimidation, and residential entry were filed. And on September 15, 2022, prosecutors filed another set of charges connected to the August incident. Another warrant was issued. Requests were made for stricter bond conditions because Orlando was already on active probation. Everything surrounding the situation was escalating: the threats, the court filings, the warrants, the fear. And as September 16th approached, the collision that had been building for months was getting closer and closer. The morning of September 16th, 2022 began like countless other mornings in Indianapolis. Parents were waking children up for school and daycare. Cars were moving through neighborhoods as people prepared for work. Outside charity childcare on the west side of the city, the atmosphere was calm and routine. Parents arrived carrying backpacks, holding children's hands, and trying to get through another normal weekday morning. Krystal Walton spent that morning doing exactly what she had done many times before. She got her children ready and drove them to school and daycare. Nothing publicly suggested that the morning was about to become deadly. What Krystal did not know was that Orlando Mitchell was already there before she arrived. He had positioned himself near the daycare parking lot before Krystal even pulled in. He waited near a light pole watching the area as parents and children moved in and out of the building. Inside the daycare, children were arriving for the day. Staff members were carrying out their normal routines. Parents were coming and going without realizing someone was waiting outside with completely different intentions. Krystal walked her children safely inside. Those moments became the final normal moments of her life. At some point, she said goodbye to her children and turned back toward the parking lot. She walked back outside toward her car completely unaware Orlando was nearby watching her movements. Then everything changed within seconds. Orlando suddenly approached her outside the daycare. He immediately brought out a gun, and gunfire erupted in the parking lot. He fired multiple shots as the quiet morning atmosphere instantly collapsed into panic and confusion. Parents nearby reacted immediately. Staff inside the daycare rushed to protect children from what was unfolding outside. Some children reportedly witnessed parts of the aftermath themselves. Krystal collapsed outside the daycare. The violence that had been building for months through threats, protective orders, court filings, and escalating fear had finally reached its worst possible outcome. Orlando fled the scene almost immediately after the shooting. And outside that daycare, while families were still trying to understand what had just happened, first responders arrived to find a mother lying in the parking lot after dropping her children off for the day. Krystal Walton was pronounced dead at the scene. The reality of what had happened spread quickly across the west side of Indianapolis. Emergency calls flooded dispatchers. Witnesses struggled to explain what they had seen. Fear and confusion moved through the area as police secured the scene outside the daycare. Parents rushed to contact loved ones. Neighbors gathered nearby trying to understand why a young mother had just been killed outside a place where children were supposed to be safe. Community members stood watching police tape surround the daycare while news crews began arriving at the scene. People who lived nearby later described the shock of seeing a woman killed in broad daylight in front of a daycare center. As investigators started piecing together the situation, it quickly became clear this was not a random act of violence. The existence of protective orders and previous domestic violence allegations soon became public knowledge. And once that information surfaced, the reaction from many people shifted from shock to anger. Because the warning signs had already existed long before that morning arrived. But while police and investigators remained outside the daycare processing the scene, Orlando Mitchell was already moving across the city. A few hours later, another emergency call came in. A community member near a bus stop contacted authorities after spotting Orlando. Officers responded to the area and located him sitting inside a vehicle approximately 3 miles away from the daycare. When officers approached, they saw that he was armed. Police later said Orlando had a rifle visible when they made contact with him. Officers repeatedly ordered him to drop the weapon, but he refused. The situation escalated quickly. Officers opened fire, striking Orlando in the leg. Body camera footage later released from the encounter captured the chaos of the arrest as officers moved toward him after the shooting. Authorities recovered firearms from the scene, including the rifle officers said he pointed at them.
Best up.
Yeah, you stay back.
Yeah, you stay back. So
What
I'm
the
going to stay on target. Jeremy, you're going to pull that rifle away before you handcuff. Do you understand?
Good.
All right, we're moving.
Yeah, he does have a handgun under him. I can see it. He does have a handgun under him. He does have a handgun under him. You see it, Jeremy? Got it? Taking suspect in custody now.
That's here. Key. Yeah, key. Yeah, come on, Jeremy. We got key.
I shot the in her face. Y'all want to shoot me in the leg?
Just in case.
Okay. How many wins on the guns do we have?
Yeah.
1, 2,
Yeah.
3.
And during the encounter, Orlando allegedly made statements admitting to what had happened earlier that morning. According to reports, body cam footage captured him saying, "I shot her in the face." The statement only deepened the horror surrounding the case. By the time Orlando was transported to the hospital, the story had already begun spreading across Indianapolis.
And we begin with that deadly shooting. Children witnessed it all.
It happened just outside of the Charity Church Child Care Center on West 10th Street. Team coverage tonight. WRTV's Rachel Wilkerson spent the day talking with community members outside of the daycare.
Our Nikki Dementri is anchoring our live coverage from the north side where police arrested that suspect. Nikki.
Hey there, good evening, Mark. I'm standing near the corner of 10th and Delaware. You can see traffic is moving. The road is open. This wasn't the case just a few hours earlier. And why? That was because this area was closed down for an officer-involved shooting. Now, police say that man that was shot during that incident, they believe it was the same man who shot and killed a mother of 2 at a daycare on Indy's west side. Now, all of this happened within a span of 3 hours, just really 3 miles apart. And tonight, we're learning that police believe that original incident was domestic in nature, and they tell me that the suspect and the victim, well, they knew each other.
Southwest 11, person shot, West 10th Street, North Holmes Avenue, church on the corner.
Friday morning around 7:20, police were called to West 10th and North Holmes, where they found a mother shot and killed.
To see this young lady laying over there deceased and her kids don't know that mommy's not coming home, that hits hard. It really hits hard.
Her family tells us that's Krystal Walton. She was dropping off her kids at this daycare.
It hits home real close and it's devastating.
Investigators with IMPD say the suspect, who she knew, walked up to the woman in the daycare parking lot and shot her several times. 3 hours later, and just 3 miles down the road.
Suspicious person, Delaware and Pryor. Possible suspect from the shooting at 10th and Hold.
A 911 caller spotted a man they believed was involved in the daycare shooting. Once officers arrived, they confirmed the man and the car matched descriptions from the daycare incident. Now police say the man was holding a gun. Soon after, shots rang out.
Shot fired.
Mike, take control, shot fired.
A witness we spoke to at the 10th and Delaware scene shared this photo of the suspect. IMPD says the suspect, Orlando Mitchell, was shot at least once, but did not say whether Mitchell fired any shots. No officers were hurt.
There were probably about 15 or more gunshots, like in rapid repeat.
Mitchell had 2 active warrants for prior domestic violence cases involving Krystal Walton. Murder charges are pending. I know you've been speaking with the victim's family. What have they told you about this young mother?
That this mother was a loving individual. She always kept a smile on her face. Anything that you asked for, she would do.
The city's director of domestic violence programming says Krystal Walton has 2 kids. Now, detectives couldn't confirm it, but say there is possibly an active protective order against Mitchell.
There was a protection order out in reference to this individual and several incidents beyond that protection order. So the main concern is, where did it fail at? What failed?
A lot of questions tonight, also a lot of healing for the community to begin as we sift through this investigation right now.
But as investigators dug deeper into the relationship between Orlando and Krystal, the case became even more disturbing. Police records, protective orders, threatening messages, and prior assault reports all began resurfacing publicly. Investigators uncovered the history leading up to the murder piece by piece. The March 2021 assault while Krystal was pregnant, the dismissed felony charges, the probation conditions, the no-contact orders, the forced entry into her home in August 2022. The threats about making her lose everything, the active warrants already issued before the murder even happened. Family members said Krystal had feared Orlando would eventually kill her. Reports also revealed that Orlando's own mother had allegedly heard alarming statements from him in the weeks leading up to the shooting. According to investigators, concerns about his mindset already existed before September 16th arrived. As more details became public, frustration grew rapidly throughout the community. Co-workers, loved ones, and domestic violence advocates openly questioned how someone with repeated allegations, active warrants, and probation violations had still remained free. Again and again, people returned to the same painful conclusion. Krystal Walton had done what she was supposed to do. She reported the violence, she contacted police, she obtained protective orders, she documented threats, she cooperated with the legal system, and still, she ended up dead outside her children's daycare. But for Krystal's family, public frustration was only one part of what followed. They still had to survive the grief itself. Just days after the shooting, family, friends, co-workers, and community members gathered outside the daycare for a vigil honoring Krystal's life. Balloons filled the area as people stood together mourning the loss of a woman many described as joyful, intelligent, loving, and deeply devoted to her children. One of the most emotional moments came when Krystal's daughter spoke publicly. "I love my mom. She was the best mom ever." The statement devastated people attending the vigil. Co-workers described Krystal as someone who brought warmth into rooms. Friends spoke about her confidence, her intelligence, and the way she stayed committed to her children despite everything happening around her. Her family also used the moment to speak openly about domestic violence and the failures they believe contributed to her death. Some directly questioned why Orlando had ever been allowed back out after the earlier assault case. Others spoke about the fear Krystal had already been living with long before she was killed. Krystal's brother later posted emotional messages online describing how difficult it had become to process losing his sister. He talked about replaying memories, scrolling through old videos and photos, and wishing he could hear her voice one more time. Krystal's homegoing service was eventually held on October 1st, 2022. But even after the funeral, the story was far from over. While Orlando Mitchell sat in jail awaiting trial for Krystal's murder, Another tragedy unfolded that pushed the case back into national attention. In July 2023, Orlando was transported for a medical appointment while still in custody. He was being handled by Marion County Sheriff's Deputy John Durham, a veteran officer with decades of experience. According to investigators, Deputy Durham transported Orlando alone, despite internal policies reportedly requiring 2 deputies for inmates facing murder charges. After the medical appointment ended, Orlando was brought back to the jail facility. But sometime during the transport, investigators said he managed to loosen part of his restraints. When they arrived back at the Sallyport area of the jail, Orlando allegedly attacked Deputy Durham using the loosened restraint chain. Deputy John Durham was killed during the attack. Authorities said Orlando then stole the transport van and attempted to flee before crashing and being recaptured shortly afterward.
The Marion County prosecutor, Ryan Mears, says they didn't make the decision to pursue the death penalty lightly, but given the circumstances, they believe it's the right thing to do. During a press conference Thursday, Marion County prosecutor Ryan Mears says there are 4 statutory aggravators that make Orlando Mitchell eligible for the death penalty.
The defendant committed the murder of the deputy at the time. The defendant was in the custody of the Marion County Sheriff, which is one statutory aggravator. The second statutory aggravator is the defendant killed a law enforcement officer as they were acting in the course of their duties. The third aggravator is the defendant committed the murder by intentionally killing the officer while he was committing the crime of robbery. And the fourth and final aggravator is the defendant has previously committed a murder at the time of this murder.
Investigators say the attack happened in the inmate intake area on the community justice campus after Deputy John Durham picked up Mitchell from a hospital visit. Officials say surveillance video shows Mitchell attacking Durham from behind, choking the deputy with a chain from his handcuffs. Documents say Mitchell's handcuffs were connected to his belly chain, but the belly chain was no longer around his waist. Police tell us Mitchell used a key to free himself from his handcuffs and took off with the transport van. He later crashed it into a light pole just outside the community justice campus.
He has no business, if convicted, to ever step foot out of a jail cell again. And our commitment to you, Mr. Prosecutor, is that the IMPD will do everything that we can to assist you and your deputies to make sure that we get a conviction in all 3 of these incidents.
The Marion County Sheriff says they are investigating whether there is anything they could have done better.
With only one deputy, is there times that we do more with less staff than we do and people make tough decisions? Yeah, probably.
They hope these changes send a message to anyone else who might consider harming a law enforcement officer.
It needs to be known that in this community, if you kill a law enforcement officer, you should be willing to sacrifice your life. It's on the books for a reason.
Prosecutor Ryan Mears tells us seeking the death penalty can extend the time period of this case, and he expects it to be a lengthy process.
The incident triggered enormous scrutiny toward the sheriff's office, particularly surrounding staffing shortages and policy failures involving inmate transport procedures. But even with another life now lost, Krystal Walton's family still had to prepare for the trial connected to her murder. When Orlando's murder trial finally began, prosecutors showed surveillance footage from the daycare. The footage reportedly captured Orlando waiting outside before Krystal arrived that morning. Jurors watched the ambush unfold on video as Krystal walked back toward her vehicle after dropping off her children. The defense attempted to argue that Orlando acted in sudden heat, but prosecutors argued the killing was planned long before Krystal ever arrived at the daycare. After only a relatively short period of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts for murder and invasion of privacy. Krystal's family described feeling relief, but not peace. Her father later referred to Orlando as a predator while speaking publicly about the case. Family members explained that no sentence would ever truly feel sufficient because Krystal's children still had to grow up without their mother. On April 1, 2025, Orlando Mitchell was sentenced to 66 years in prison.
A Marion County judge said the system failed an Indianapolis woman who was shot and killed by the father of her baby.
So the judge gave that father, Orlando Mitchell, the maximum sentence for murdering Krystal Walton. He gunned her down outside a daycare on the west side of Indianapolis. Our Rich Nye was in the courtroom for that sentencing today, and tonight shares reaction from her family.
A camera was not allowed in the courtroom for Orlando Mitchell's sentencing. This video is from a previous court hearing. This is video of Krystal Walton's family and friends who filled the gallery Tuesday.
We want everybody to remember, to know that Krystal was very well loved then, now, and forever. She'll never, ever be forgotten.
In September 2022, Mitchell ambushed Walton, shooting her in the face after she dropped off her 2 kids at Charity Child Care on West 10th Street in Hawville. Mitchell ignored the protective order Walton had in place for an alleged strangling incident in March 2021 when Walton was pregnant with their son. In that case, Mitchell took a plea agreement for domestic battery with 1 day in jail and 1 year probation.
As this trial is ending, we're also able to see the effect that it'll have on the community. And hopefully lawmakers, judges will come together and start making better decisions as far as the laws and making stiffer penalties so we can prevent some of these senseless murders.
The judge gave Mitchell 66 years in prison for murder and invasion of privacy.
In giving Mitchell the maximum sentence, Judge Charles Miller said that during the trial, Mitchell seemed to take pride and delight in what he did. The judge said that he believed that Mitchell was happy that the murder was caught on security camera for an audience to watch.
Mitchell next faces another murder trial for the strangulation death of Deputy John Durham while in custody in July 2023. That is a death penalty case.
Hopefully compounding with that, we'll be looking at a death penalty. I'm praying for it every day. Along with that, I'm praying that I'm alive to see him take his last breath.
That trial is scheduled for August of next year. Rich Nye, 13 News.
The executive director of Charity Child Care also testified today. She said that Mitchell took away the sanctity of a place that more than 300 children call home every single day. And she said that corner of Hawville will never be the same.
But even after the conviction, the larger questions surrounding the case never fully disappeared. Because years later, Krystal Walton's story still forces people to confront how many warning signs can exist before someone is finally protected. Protective orders existed, police reports existed, court hearings existed, threats were documented, warrants had already been issued, and despite all of that, Krystal Walton still left home one morning to take her children to daycare and never made it back to her car. Thank you for watching Family Crimes TV. If you've been following these gripping true crime stories with me, make sure you subscribe because I bring you powerful, thought-provoking crime videos every single day. If this case stayed with you, there's more waiting for you here. See you in the next one.